Hey, what's up? It's Rick Dees in the morning. Right now, VinnDog.
Let's get ready to split the alleys and go hard in the yard for Jesus, baby.
Access granted.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's VinnDog in the house, and thank you for dropping by. It's going to be a doozy of a podcast. Don't let the government be your dad. You are self-governed.
Sir, yes, sir!
And now it's time.
Yo, VinnDog!
Coming live from a 35,000-foot view, the Captain America for Jesus himself, VinnDoggRadio.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Monday afternoon, early evening, or Tuesday, wherever you may be watching. Thank you so much for being here. We are absolutely 10,000% live on YouTube, so like, share, subscribe if you are watching on YouTube. If you are on the infamous Rumble, please add me on Rumble at VinnDoggRadio USA, on Getter, Gettr. Shouts out to Jason Miller and the crew at Getter for always putting me on the front page and always trying to get people to watch the podcast on Getter. Yes, thank you very much. If you are on X, formerly known as Twitter, please add, repost, and follow. Thank you very much for being here, ladies and gentlemen. If you feel led on your heart by the Lord to support the podcast, please do. It is in the description and also in the ticker on ways that you could support the podcast, and we can keep this moving forward, and we want to glorify the Lord as much as possible. All right? Ladies and gentlemen, I also want to thank my man, Pete Garcia, for having me on earlier on his podcast. It was great. It was great to be his guest, and it was an interesting conversation. So after this podcast, you can take a listen to that. But in the meantime, I have my friend, Mr. John Holler, stopping by. Mr. Holler, how you doing, sir?
Hi, Benny. How you doing? Good to be with you.
Yes. Oh, man.
I'll have to check that out with Pete. He never has me on. No, just...
Yeah, it was a very interesting conversation that he and I had today. But we're gonna have.
What did you talk about? Give us a preview.
We basically spoke about how today's culture has changed and how the entertainment industry has had a big impact on that. It was really, really interesting.
Did you talk about Taylor Swift? No, I hope not.
No.
Okay.
He's definitely off my radar.
Well, I just said Taylor Swift so we would get more clicks.
Oh, yeah, Swifties. All those Swifties out there.
They all need help.
Yeah, they all need Jesus.
They do. Get away from that witch.
Yeah, tell me about the witches brewing. Tell me, big time.
She doesn't even hide it.
Man.
So anyway, hello to everybody in the chat. Good to see all of you, or see you all, or see your comments.
Yes, yeah, the comments are rolling already. So we were talking about how things are happening in Europe and how it's falling, and it is amazing to me that a lot of people are oblivious to all of this too, John.
I think, I know we're going to talk about Syria tonight at some point, because that's sort of an important issue on the front of everybody's mind. And I'm a Bible prophecy guy, and how does this relate to Bible prophecy and that sort of thing? Mm-hmm. But Syria's connected to what's going on in the UK. I did an interview with my friend Mark Sutherland today in the UK. He actually lives up in Scotland, but we talk sometimes I don't remember if we talk about it on the program or in the pre-show or after show. So I spoke at a conference in the UK 6 years ago, 2018, around Thanksgiving, time of the year, which means that it gets dark in London about 3:30 in the afternoon because they're so far north. Mm-hmm. But after the conference, we did the conference up at a Christian center in Swanwick, which isn't. Don't try to do that phonetically because you'll get the wrong. They always spell things differently over there, so that when you mispronounce them and you spell them, you say them phonetically, they could say, "Oh, no, that's not how we do that. All those letters are silent or something."
Oh, wow.
So no, I'm just joking. It kind of keeps you on your, back on your heels. Like, listen, do you know where I'm at? So you know where I'm at. So it doesn't make any difference. I have enough trouble with English, let alone over there where they think they invented the language. They probably did. But so we did a conference up in the Central Highlands of what's called the Central Highlands of the UK. And then we went down to London for about a week. And some people took us down to London. Now, I want to make it very clear. These are good Christian guys. They do a lot of mission work in Asia and other places. So these guys are not racist. But as we're driving into London, they said, hey, we're in London now, and it's time to play our favorite game. Can you spot a real Englishman? and as I looked around, I thought, well, nobody looked like King Charles, that's for sure, or Princess Diana. And we stayed at a hotel in the Marble Arch area, which is Marble Arch used to be at Buckingham Palace. They moved it to the other side of Hyde Park, away from the palace, and they put a thing there called Speaker's Corner, which is the great free speech zone of England. And, it's where a lot of good Christian guys like Jay Smith and Jacob Prash, they will go down and debate the Muslims down there.
Oh, yeah.
But, it's quintessential free speech England. And we stayed at the Marriott Hotel about 4 blocks from Marble Arch, Hyde Park. Our hotel, as a Marriott, had 50 TV stations available on the television. 10 of them were Arabic language. As we walked around the neighborhood there, I saw more full burqas in central London than I did in times that I've spent in Judea and Samaria, the Palestinian areas of what's called the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, which are very, strictly religious Muslim areas. But I saw more burqas in London than I did in Israel.
That must have been a lot of burqa.
It is. I mean, it's very Islamic, and understand England changed. I don't remember what year they did Brexit, but just before they did Brexit, there was a massive amount of immigration from the Middle East, mainly Syria, because of the effects of the Syrian civil war, which we've seen playing out today. And it's changed the face of London. The current mayor of London is a Muslim. There are a number of major cities in the UK where the mayor and the city council is controlled by Muslims. They've recently had some unrest in the UK. They've what happened was there was in a town city called Southport, 3 young girls got stabbed. They were stabbed by a foreign national who had, I think he had immigrated. I'm not sure. But people started criticizing it because of the immigration that came in. It's not too dissimilar from the debate during the last election over the immigration that's affected a town 45 minutes from here called Springfield, Ohio. It's kind of an issue in the election. And they, so people complained about it. They protested it. They posted on social media about it. Now, the one bit of misinformation they had when they posted about it is they said he was a recent immigrant. It turned out he was not a recent immigrant. So the police started arresting people that had posted on social media about this. One of the Metropolitan Police in London actually also said, if you're in another country and you post about it, we will indict you for a crime here, and we will seek to have you extradited, arrested in your country, and transported to the UK to stand trial.
Wait a minute, John. So they didn't learn the first time in 1776, I take it, huh?
With the woke, crazy left in the world, lawfare is not subject to things like the United States Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is what they've done to President Trump and people allied with President Trump here in the United States over the last few years. And by the way, Trump got on Meet the Press yesterday and he said, the first thing I'm doing is I'm going to pardon all well, I don't know if he said all. I'm going to pardon the people from the J6 situation that are in prison.
Mm-hmm.
And he, and the left is melting down about this. But the Metropolitan Police Chief in London or around London said, we will come to America and arrest you. Now, that was a big concern to me as we were getting ready to vote. Because, I do stuff in the UK and I'm pretty honest about what I try to be honest, what I post about on X and other places.
Mm-hmm.
But that if I had said the wrong thing against a certain religious group, Vinny, there are people serving years in prison right now. And this just happened in the last few months. And within 6 weeks, there are people serving 3, 4, 6 years in jail, in prison for what they said. In fact, London or the UK prisons are overcrowded, so they were letting violent criminals go.
Wow.
To put in prison people who had tweeted about a certain religion.
Right.
That was tied to this guy. Now, so this went on for months. One guy in prison actually committed suicide because of the stress of that. And understand that in the prison, there's a significant portion of the prison population that's committed to a certain religion, and it's very difficult for Christians.
I bet. Mm-hmm.
So let's fast forward a couple months into this. It now comes out that the guy is a member of a radical Muslim mosque. Oh, he's not a recent immigrant, but he's everything that everybody said that he did. And there's been no apology by the prosecutors, police, or anything. You see people going to protest. This has happened to Ezra Klein up in Canada from Rebel News. He went to he's Jewish. He went to a pro-Palestinian protest. And the police threatened to arrest him because he was upsetting other people.
Wow.
He wasn't doing anything except being there, his mere presence. One of the places in the world that's long been considered one of the bastions of free speech is the Oxford Union at Oxford, Cambridge universities. They have great debates there. Mm-hmm. Last week, I think it was November 28th, so it would have been a little over a week ago, they had a debate. They had 3 people. The proposition up for debate that night was Israel is an apartheid state that's guilty of genocide. So they had 3 people arguing for the proposition. One was an Israeli guy named Michael Peled, who's the son of a former IDF general, and he's just he's totally unhinged. During the debate, by the way, he was asked. He said, I want to get the quote correctly because he's a lunatic and he'll probably sue you if you're incorrect. One of the people arguing for the proposition said that what was done in the invasion by Hamas and other people, normal Palestinians in Gaza, the invasion into Israel on October 7th was an act of heroism.
Wow.
So they had the I can't remember his name, Youssef. He's the guy. His father was the founder of Hamas. and he's come out and spoken about Hamas. He was there. There was another guy. He's written a great article in the Spectator magazine. Another Israeli Arab journalist named Habad, who argued, and then they actually literally physically threw him out of the room. I have the video. Right. And then one of the other speakers was the great British barrister, attorney, Natasha Hausdorff. And she just eviscerated the other side. All those are available at the Oxford Union Debates YouTube channel. I would recommend you go and look at them. By the way, they didn't post Youssef's video. Somebody had to, it's on X. Somebody recorded it and posted it, even though the people running the debate union there at Oxford said, oh, we will put everything up. They lied. They refused to have their pictures taken with the people defending Israel. Mm-hmm. The head of this dweeb that's the president of the Oxford Union. This is in the UK. This is the great bastion of free speech that's gone. Mm-hmm. And I would recommend, by the way, that you look up Natasha Hausdorff, Hausdorff. Just do a search for her on YouTube. Go up and then do the filter and select upload date, and you'll get all the recent things, all the interviews that she's done. She's just absolutely brilliant. She is a phenomenal defender of Israel. So back to this thing in Southport. So what everybody said about the guy turned out to be true, except when they said he's a recent immigrant. Tommy Robinson, who, you know, is, everybody says, oh, he's a lunatic, he's crazy, he's a fascist. I believe he's back in prison.
Yeah, they did imprison him. Yes, they did.
And he didn't do it. They're trying to kill him. They're putting him in these prisons where there's a heavy population of a certain religion. And I think they hope that Tommy will be killed in prison.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how else to describe it. It's really one of the most unbelievable things we said. But all in all, and so this massive immigration that was taking place into Europe and into the UK has completely changed the nature of British society. I mean, I don't think we're. It's hard. You quickly are labeled a bigot, racist, and that type of thing. But you know, the world is changing as we're sitting here.
Yeah, it is.
Mm-hmm. You know, in my own city, Columbus, Ohio, we have probably, I'm going to guess 175,000, maybe 200,000 Muslim Somalians that are in our city.
Holy smokes, that's a lot of people.
Minneapolis probably has twice as many as we do. And I remember, and like I said, I'm not racist, okay? I don't mind if people want to, I love that people want to immigrate to the United States, but you know, there's something about assimilating into the culture. And I'm pretty aware of what's going on. Well, so I'll tell you two stories. So we were coming home we spent a lot of time in California. My mother-in-law, after my father-in-law died, got remarried to a guy. So we're out in California 6-7 weeks a year. So I know all the freeways in Southern California. I don't even need a map. Mm-hmm. So we're flying home. We connected through Minneapolis Airport. We went to the food court to grab something to eat. And my wife and I kind of looked at each other. Did we get on the wrong plane? Because it looks like we're in Damascus.
which has fallen, of course.
Right, but everybody in the food court was of a certain religion. It was obvious that we're running all the restaurants. A couple of years ago, so my wife and I grew up in kind of a pietistic fellowship of churches, and you would not ever the struggle that we had in the church was being like drafted into the military. Should you be a conscientious objector?
Mm-hmm.
And my father struggled with it. He was in World War II, injured, fairly severe leg injury in Belgium near the time of the Battle of the Bulge. And he was a guy, he went to university to become a pastor. So he struggled with it. He wrote his Master of Divinity paper on conscientious objection. What should the Christian response be? So it was an issue in our household growing up. So we never had a gun. And I always told my wife, when you're ready, we'll do it. So she told me one day, called me at work and said, sign us up for the course, for a concealed carry course, and we're going to go buy a gun. So I signed up for a thing. I got in the car, I drove a few blocks over and parked outside a building where I actually used to work. And Vinny, as I'm getting out of my car, at the end of my car, so this happens occasionally. It was almost 60 degrees here the last couple of days. It was 62 degrees, beautiful day in December. And I looked at the hood of my car, and at the end of my car was looked to be Somalian or Middle Eastern guy in a muscle shirt, built like an Ohio State linebacker. So this would have been this was about 8 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And he had on a full balaclava face mask.
Oh no.
A short sleeve shirt, 62 degrees, but he had on a full face mask. You could only see his eyes.
Oh boy.
And what was he doing? He was walking down the street. So we're 1 block from the state capitol building in Columbus. I'm right across the street from where I had parked was a big ballroom convention area for the big hotel on the Capitol Square in Columbus, where they would have a couple thousand people come for business lunches and that type of thing. He was walking down the street taking pictures of buildings with his phone. There was hardly anybody on the street. Now, I'm thinking this is not right. So I took pictures of him taking pictures of taking the buildings, and a lady came across, a guy came across the street and a lady came across the street. And to say that she was freaked out is an understatement. The other guy was just like, I said, did you notice that? He goes, what are you talking about? He just crossed the street. He didn't even notice. She was freaking out. She goes, what is going on? Is that guy? And I'm just telling you, I took a picture, called the police. It got sent up through the terrorism task force because I had people come and interview me about it and, what I was doing and what I observed. Because I followed him down the street. He was taking pictures of buildings all the way down the street, Capitol, hotel, office buildings, and things like that. Mm-hmm. And maybe I was just heightened and aware because I had just signed up for a concealed carry course, but it did not. And I'm telling you, me, we've been together. We're big guys. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
This guy was a big linebacker type guy,
mm-hmm.
the 48-inch chest and the 30-inch waist type guy.
Oh boy. Oh man.
Yeah, somebody I see in the chat said maybe he was just bird watching. Yeah, right. He was just bird watching.
Yeah.
And somebody said, well, I would just pull the mask off. Listen, this guy would have had me. I wrestled in college. I actually wrestled, upper weight, as you can imagine, upper weight classes in college, high school and college. I would not have taken this guy on. He would have eaten my lunch. So I don't know what happened. Nothing ever came of it, but the Somalians generally, they have their own mosques. They live pretty isolated in a couple of neighborhoods in Columbus. And I've been told that some of those neighborhoods are really no-go zones. So I'm just saying and so when you look at this immigration that's come from areas particularly related to one religion, it's having an impact on cities and counties and things like that here in America, and it's worse in Europe. A lot of those came from the Middle East as a result of the Syrian civil war, where the Assad regime killed. There's probably 1 million dead Syrians since 2011.
Yikes.
The population of Syria was 23 million at the time. half of those have been internally or externally displaced since 2011. Now, my question is, so 1 million dead Arabs in Syria, and I would say 99% plus of them are the result of the Syrian regime under Bashar al-Assad. And and how many marches at Oxford, how many marches at Columbia, how many marches at Harvard, UCLA, or any of these other goofy countries or places have taken place? And the answer is zero.
Right.
But let the Jews defend themselves from being invaded, and the world melts down.
Trouble in turn 4.
In Melbourne, Australia, the other day, a Jewish synagogue was firebombed.
And nothing's being done about that, probably.
Well, everybody's wringing their hands. Oh, isn't it terrible? And who knows if anybody will ever be caught that does that. So we have an unequal system of justice. By the way, the guy in New York who was on the subway, and there was a guy threatening everybody, and he put him in a chokehold, and unfortunately the guy died.
Yep. Yeah, I remember that story.
He was charged with second-degree manslaughter. His bail was set very high, while people who were of different races were given no bail or charges dropped or charges not brought at all. So he went through trial. The jury, they were given a couple of different charges, and it was a put-up job all the way through. The prosecutor was an absolute leftist lunatic.
Yep, Alvin Bragg, yep.
Yep. Well, and the assistant prosecutor, I saw a video of this person, and the video said she was a she, so I'll assume that maybe they know something that I didn't observe in the video, if you understand what I'm saying.
Oh, I'm getting it. Yes.
And she was talking about a case she had charged where a guy had robbed somebody at an ATM on the Upper East Side of New York. I've spent a lot of time up there, and it's a great neighborhood. It's pretty wealthy, and the guy was older, and he died in the robbery, and so he got charged with felony murder. But she says, "Well, I don't really want to charge him with felony murder because the guy who was doing the robbery had things in his background." So a guy gets killed. He's 88. I don't care if he's 12. He was murdered in cold blood by this guy, and she wanted to let him off. So she was the actual prosecutor on the case involving the guy on the subway. Today, the jury came back and found him not guilty.
Good.
So that was good news today. And it's very difficult to talk about this because you sound like a racist. I could care less. What I care about is what you are and what you do. And that's where the problem is. So in London, they have a Muslim mayor, and they don't do it, and the whole situation is messed up. So I saw a picture of the bridge near Westminster, where the Houses of Parliament sit, the palace that's owned by the British royal family. And so they have a picture, and it says, protest against the Syrian regime's killing of 1 million people, and the bridge is empty. Protest against the 200,000 who died in these attacks in this country in the Middle East. The bridge is empty. Israel defending itself, and the bridge is completely full of protesters and pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas protesters.
Well, go figure.
So London has changed, and understand that this, London did Brexit. They got rid of got out of the European Union, in part because of this massive immigration that was taking place.
Mm-hmm. Now,
I saw an interview with one of the guys in the government in Poland, and I probably on the BBC, they're lunatics, biased lunatics. Anyway, they hate Israel.
Yeah, that's an understatement for those people.
Yeah, I'm going to interview in the not too distant future. I hope to interview Trevor Asserson, who did a report last year on the anti-Israel bias of the BBC. It's quite a good report. So I'm trying to arrange an interview with him. But this reporter was asking the guy from Poland, well, how many immigrants have you let in? He said 0. Well, how many are you going to let in? He said 0. Did you hear me? I said 0.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, that was she about had a meltdown when he said that. He said, listen, we're trying to protect our people. We have the most important thing we do is protect our borders in a country.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there you go. It's
yeah.
So so all of that though is tied to this Syrian civil war that we've been reading about over the past 10 days.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Syria's always been a problem. Parts of Syria are just absolutely gorgeous and beautiful. I hear you would be insane if you went there. I mean, it's just not safe. And so as they're taking down the Assad regime, he's left, he's fled. They're going through his palace. He's got all these Ferraris, Gullwing, antique Mercedes, very expensive cars in his palace in Damascus. Families fled. The government has fallen.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Middle East is in a bit of a
uproar,
meltdown. I mean, things have changed dramatically. A little over 400 and some days ago, Israel was attacked from Gaza. Hezbollah did not enter in, but they started firing missiles. They've, 150,000 people in the north and south of Israel along the borders with Gaza, the border with Lebanon, have had to evacuate their homes. The cities, the towns and villages in the north are sometimes 50% destroyed by Hezbollah rocket and missile fire.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the goal of the recent operation into Lebanon by Israel was, the prime minister said, we want those people to come home. They haven't come home yet.
Mm-hmm.
But and we could talk about it in more detail if you want, the operations that Israel has done in Gaza in Lebanon after October 7th, 700 secret raids into Lebanon.
Mm-hmm.
Then the attack known as the Grim Beepers.
Yes.
And then followed that up with complete decapitation of the Hamas and Hezbollah and a lot of the Iranian IRGC leadership that's been running these terror operations against Israel and planning for bigger terror operations. Israel completely decapitated them. Nasrallah is dead. Mohammed Deif is dead.
Mm-hmm.
Ismail Hania is dead. Abu Sinwar is dead.
Good.
And they got what they deserved. And so there were some Christians that would really criticize me for saying that, but Vin, I've mentioned this before. So I used to travel a lot. I mean, I was on planes every day, all week long.
Yep.
And this was the morning of 9/11. I was supposed to fly up to Boston the next day.
Okay.
My mother called the house. She saw what was happening in New York, and she was freaking out because I was in New York all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And New York, Boston, D.C. And so after 9/11, I remember 2 weeks after 9/11, I flew to Philadelphia on a 737, and it was me and one other guy on the plane. Remember one night I flew from Ontario up to Sacramento on a late night flight because I had a meeting the next morning. The Southwest. I was the only person on the plane.
Wow.
Let me tell you something. That is a freaky, weird experience. It's like one of those horror movies, Ghost Plane or whatever. But as I was flying around, you become situationally aware. Okay, what am I going to do if somebody tries to take over this plane?
Right.
And I got in an argument with some Christians, and I said, I would try to take the person out if they were trying to hijack the plane, knowing what I know.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And Christians said, oh, I can't believe, how are they going to ever hear the gospel? And I said, if I don't do anything, how are all the other people on the plane ever going to hear the gospel? And I'll take my chances at the Bema seat with Jesus that maybe I did or didn't do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
But for now, I'm going to say is you have to defend your family and that type of thing. And so there's this heavy pietism thing in Christianity. And I grew up in that part of the evangelical church. So I understand what you think. And so people are upset. And, if you say you voted for Trump, and I'll admit I voted for Trump. Okay. But I don't think Trump, that doesn't mean I worship Trump. I think he's a jerk a lot of the times. But I'm not voting for a pastor. I'm voting for a president. And people will say, well, if you're doing anything to try to change things, you're a servant of the culture and not a servant of Jesus.
Wow.
And I'm like, wait a minute, dude, do you believe that there should be a law against murder? Then why shouldn't there be a law against mutilating children in these transgender surgeries?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's, but I will say, being like one or two guys on a 737, usually they can carry 165 people.
Yeah.
You hear every creak and every seat all through that plane when you're sitting there. It's very bizarre experience. And I've had that happen. And it was fairly common after 9/11 for a couple of months as people wouldn't travel. So I was on the road every day, crisscrossing the country, sometimes 3 out of 4 weeks in a month. So it's a really weird experience. I bet. And you can see why they could make a horror movie out of it. Because it's a freaky, weird experience. Mm-hmm. So we have this massive problem in the world. Israel, I think, is at the epicenter. of everything. And I don't know if you want to talk about that tonight or not. I'll follow your lead.
Yeah. I do want to talk. I do want to talk about the things that are happening with Israel too.
Okay.
I just want to share this video real quick.
Sure.
A farmer's plea from England.
Just want fair play for the farmers. Everything we're doing it is for our kids. It's their future. And everything is just going against it. This inheritance tax it's ridiculous. It's the final straw.
I'm just so emotional. Why do we as farmers have to do this? We shouldn't,
This government needs to realise it's never been hungry since World War II. They're going to be hungry because if they keep putting tax on the farmers, it's going to have a massive impact.
From 2026, farmers will be liable for inheritance tax at 20% on farms worth more than £1 million. They claim it will force many to sell up to pay the bill. The government claims that only a small number of farms would be affected. Their figures are wrong, according to protesters here. Farmers say this is just the start. Next week, they are planning to hold their first ever strike action, and tens of thousands of them are going to be protesting in London on Tuesday. Farmers will be withholding meat and crops from supermarkets in the days ahead, and say that if they're not listened to, there will be more action to come.
Well,
so I know a little bit about this. I have represented farmers in my legal career. It's a very difficult life. And, I live in the Midwest, so this is corn and soybean country.
mm-hmm.
And I want to say this. So there's a route that I can take, like if I'm over around Dayton, I cut up by Springfield, up through the country, through the Miami River, Little Miami River Valley. So it's bottom farmland. So it's very rich soil. There are guys over there, there's one guy who raises sweet corn for stores. He has 6,500 irrigated acres. Not too far from me, in the county just south of there, Bill Gates bought 50,000 acres of farmland over the past decade.
Wow.
Now, he does it for an investment. But by the way, the word is that he wants to take about 10% of it and cover it with solar panels for a solar electricity farm. He's a lunatic, okay? And it's very expensive. The equipment is very expensive. They have modified things. And I grew up, we had farmers in the church where my dad pastored up in Northeast Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
And it's changed. I remember tractors for back in those days, and the tractors they use now, there's no comparison. And so as you're driving through this land, but this is a great example of God's provision for man. You drive up through this valley, it's rolling hills, and then it is corn as far as the eye can see.
Wow.
And I'm sitting there and thinking, like, our God is such a good God.
Mm-hmm.
Because you take these little seeds and then you get like little trees full of corn from them.
Mm-hmm.
Every year, you throw them in dirt. God provides some water from the air, and then you get more than what you put into the ground.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And this is how God has provided for us. And now we're in a situation where through taxes on inheriting of farms and that type of thing, it's hard for farmers to make a living or survive. They provide food for us. Now, as you know, I'm a big guy. If the famine comes, I'm probably going to be around a little bit longer than anybody else.
Same here.
I have a famine ready body.
Yeah.
I always joke with my, close relatives that My nephew got married a few years ago. Wonderful gal, but she's a runner. And you can look at me and you can say, Haller's not a runner. I always say I am preparing to run in a marathon. I'm in training. I'm working on the carbo loading, and eventually I get around to starting the running part. But I always joke with her, I said, how serious a runner are you? And she said, well, she goes, not that serious. I said, do you have a 13.1 or 26.2 sticker on the back of your car? And her face kind of turned red. She goes, yeah. I said, then you're a serious runner, but thank you for identifying yourself, because when the famine comes, we'll know where all the skinny people live, so we can just write down your addresses so we can go get your stuff. The rest of us who have famine-ready bodies will survive much longer. So anyway, but this farming thing is a great provision of God. But the other part that I'm sure you saw some of the videos with these farmers is they want to make the farm, they want them to go electric.
Yeah.
It will destroy farming. Mm-hmm. Do you know how much electricity, how big the batteries would need to be to get a tractor to pull something through a field and plow it? And that type, it would destroy farming. You destroy farming, you destroy food. You destroy food, people die. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's the ultimate goal, but it's just it's crazy. So these farmers in the UK and there's a lot of, I was up in Scotland last year. Mm-hmm. I was playing golf, but I was driving around. And the one thing that I noticed was these incredibly beautiful, old, organized, productive farms everywhere I went. Mm-hmm. Throughout Scotland and throughout England. But now they're trying to destroy it. And it's like, you do understand that's where the food comes. You don't go to it's not a factory someplace. It's a lot of really, really hard work. And somebody I see here says climate change is a hoax. It absolutely is. Recently in the Washington Post, of all places, mm-hmm. they published a chart that showed, now I'm a young Earth guy. I don't think the world's been around that long, but they said 450 million years of evolution, human history. And it showed the temperatures, like how hot the Earth was. And you go back 450 million years, it was pretty warm. There's been a couple cool periods. And then all the way at the end, they show the last 50 million years. And there's a little, relative to the rest of the chart, there's this little teeny tiny spike up. Mm-hmm. And the spike up is still below most of the history of the Earth. It's cooler now. Mm-hmm. And they're trying to completely change the world on this hoax. And I hope it gets warmer, by the way. If I'm fighting for tea times in Ohio in early January, that's fine. I think that would be a great world to live in. Mm-hmm. But this Washington Post was based on a scientific article, and even some of the climate change people said, oh, well, that's kind of interesting. But they're not going to change their opinion and the control that they want to bring along for it. So anyway, what those farmers, they need prayer, they need assistance, they need political activists to help them, mm-hmm. because they're trying to take them out. And as I said, I've represented farmers, big farms, and these guys work there. They really work hard to make food. And they can have this year we had a pretty big drought here in Ohio. I don't know how that affected the farms, but it was, I know you go to the farmer's market in the sweet corn, it stopped a lot earlier this year than it usually does.
Oh man.
Because we had a massive drought here in Ohio. I thought it was like I woke up that I somehow wake up back in Southern California at my in-laws, because you get these fire warnings out there all the time when it's dry.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, absolutely.
But we're getting them here in Ohio on our weather apps a lot this year. High fire danger today. This is Ohio. But it's not. By the way, back when the earth was warmer, there were no car factories. There were no trucks. There were no diesel-powered tractors or anything like that causing global warming.
Right.
If you go 2 hours north of here, that's the Great Lakes were carved out by massive glaciers, ice sheets. They were a mile thick 2 hours north of where I'm sitting.
Oh, wow.
Those melted off, created and melted off and filled the Great Lakes before there was any industrialization anywhere in the world. So kind of seems that we want to think that we're sort of responsible for everything, but we're not. So anyway, so this is all, but I think all of this desire for control is part of this globalist beast system and all this other stuff that they're trying to bring in.
Oh yeah, absolutely. 100%. And I am definitely a young earth guy. I didn't do this 450 million year boogery.
Right.
I'm 6,000 years. Okay. that's
give or take a little bit, but it's fair. And one of my own personal reason is, I drive around, I drive south of Columbus, I drive outside of Chicago, and there's these giant mounds, piles of trash. And I'm thinking if the world's, if man's been around for 2 million years or whatever, there would be a lot bigger piles of trash around.
Yes.
Because we do leave a lot of trash. So the lack of huge trash mounds leads me to believe that man hasn't been around that long.
Absolutely. So, you know what? Since we were going to talk about Israel and how everything is playing out over there, isn't it amazing how they're getting blamed for every single thing, just about?
It's pretty amazing. I will tell you, over the last 24 hours, I have been absolutely chagrined at people, even in the Christian community, that have said that the takedown by this jihadi group of the Assad regime was an Israeli operation.
Wow.
I do not know how you can say that if you're a thinking human being. I'm sorry. Israel is worried about these jihadis. They're not going to make them take down. They could live with Assad for a long time. They've been living with Assad. The Assad regime in Syria, in Damascus, has run that country for 54 years. So what was 50? Excuse me one second. I do not understand why my phone it's this artificial intelligence and stuff. I think I shut this Siri off and now I said Siri. So now my phone's going to go off again. It keeps talking to me when I'm talking in these podcasts, doing searches and stuff. We never saw this. But look, Israel did not fund these jihadi groups. That's just a ridiculous notion. Because now Israel's concerned that these guys are on the Israeli border and they're going to come down. And last year, these groups, HST and others, they had they published a thing that said they're coming after the Jews. They were going to come after the Jews.
Wow.
So I'm concerned about that. So let's just sort of look at recent history and how did we get here? because a lot of people have thought the Assad regime was going to fall. As I mentioned, I was up there near Dara, Syria, when the Syrian civil war started in March of 2011. I was 30 miles away that day. 1 million dead, half the country displaced, some internally, 3 million people, refugees, Syrian refugees into Turkey, close to 3 million in Jordan, 1.5 million in Lebanon. And Jordan and Lebanon are not very big countries. I mean, Jordan's like 5 million, and they've got 2.5 million refugees. Lebanon is 4.5 or 5 million people. They have 1.5 million Syrian refugees. Turkey has several million. So the Syrian civil war went back and forth. Of course, we know the whole history of ISIS and taking over large portions of Syria along the Euphrates River and over to the Tigris River, where Mosul, the site of ancient Nineveh, is located. And a lot of people, and I think the Iranians and others, everybody kind of worked to get rid of ISIS. The guy that's now the head of this rebel group, HTS, that took over Syria over the past few days, is former al-Nusra, al-Qaeda, ISIS guy. And now he's being portrayed throughout the Western media like a reformed Islamist. He's not a reformed Islamist. He's just an expert in the art of deception, which Muhammad provided for, or whoever wrote the Quran or whoever made up the Quran. Deception is okay. So I'm concerned. There are reports already that members of this group have gone into Aleppo, which I think is Syria's largest city, and announced that their palace of justice, their courts, that they will be enacting Sharia law.
Ouch.
There are also some reports of some beheadings taking place. And understand, the Assad regime that they kicked out is brutal. I've been watching some of these videos of these prisons that they're liberating. These are some of the worst prisons ever devised in human history that Assad has been running. Pretty good evidence that they have crematoria to get rid of the bodies. Some of these people, there's one guy, I saw him interviewed on Arab television. He didn't know who he was, and he didn't know where he came from. He'd been in a dungeon without human contact for so long, he could not remember who he was.
Wow.
And they're finding toddlers, children in these prisons where people have had, I don't know, women have had children in these prisons. These are some of the most brutal places on the planet. So you have to deal with all that. And a lot of people are going to be really upset with the Assad regime. They're going to want revenge. It's totally understandable. But the concern is that they're going to come after Israel. So let's go step back just 3 months about. Israel did the Grim Beepers. That Grim Beepers operation, they decapitated Hezbollah. They've gone into Lebanon. They've taken out a lot of facilities. They've made great inroads against Hezbollah, also against Hamas in Gaza. These are all assets funded by Iran. Iran, it's estimated, has spent $50 billion over the last decade supporting, propping up the Assad regime because it uses it as part of their Shia Crescent highway from Tehran to the Mediterranean to get weapons over there to go against Israel. It's also estimated that they spent about $40 billion on Hezbollah in Lebanon. So you have roughly $100 billion investment that has really pretty much evaporated in the last 2 months.
Wow, that's pretty.
Right. So Iran seems weak. So these rebels, and I think people think, well, the United States has to be behind it or Israel has to be behind it because they move from the north of Syria to Damascus all the way to they had groups that came up from the south and they met in Damascus. And they did this in like 3 days. You can look at the maps. It's a stunning operation. If the Lord tarries, it'll be written about in history books. But they're described in the press inaccurately as kind of a ragtag bunch of rebels. That's just baloney. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They have planned this for years. Syria's been fairly calm for the last 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
During that time, these groups, they've organized, they put in modern military command and control structures, communications, and the development and use of fairly sophisticated drones.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that the main funder behind a lot of this has been Turkey. Turkey wants to remake the Ottoman Empire. I saw somebody say, well, under the Turkish constitution, the army, the military is supposed to be secular. Maybe that's what the Constitution says, but that's not what it is now. It used to be, but you're talking about ancient history now. For 22 years, Recep Erdogan, the dictator of the democratically elected dictator of Turkey, has imprisoned more journalists over the last decade than any other country on the planet.
Yeah, and he's a nut job too.
He is a radical Muslim Brotherhood type.
Mm-hmm.
His first sort of rise to being prominent in Istanbul, by the way, his family comes from the area of the Black Sea around Georgia, which would be the northern regions of the ancient Assyrian Empire, which is kind of an interesting thing. By the way, if you've ever been to London and you go to the British Museum, you see all these panels that came from Nineveh, Mosul, showing the brutality of the Assyrians. It's unbelievable what these people were like. And that culture has existed for thousands of years over there. So Erdogan comes from sort of the ethnic, the geographic region of the ancient Assyrian Empire, which was one of the most brutal empires the world has ever seen. And he ended up in Istanbul, and he used to ride the ferries across the Bosporus, standing on the bow of the ship, reciting the Quran. He is a committed, radical Muslim. And I'm sorry, that means taqiyya, deception, is part of the religion, and he's one of its biggest proponents. And so over the 22 years that he's been in power in Turkey, I think he was mayor of Istanbul, and then he became prime minister, then president. He keeps changing the constitution to keep himself in office. He has completely remade Turkish society into a Muslim-oriented society. Mm-hmm. We know from the prophetic scriptures, the areas of Meshech, Tubal, Tagarma, those are all Turkish areas.
Yep.
So when you see the prophecy, a lot of people will say, well, we need to look at what the ethnic composition was when Ezekiel made the prophecy. And I'm not sure that's accurate. Ezekiel was talking about a geographic region that he was seeing in his prophecies. Mm-hmm. Daniel as well. And so who was there and who's still there and where the people immigrated to, I don't think is the proper analysis. They were talking about a real world and a geographic regions that people would come from and be involved in geopolitical end times organization of nations at that time. So anyway, so Erdogan is a radical Muslim. He's put giant mosques outside DC, outside Baltimore, other places in Europe. He's funded the Turkish immigrants that went on to Europe are very committed to Turkish politics through the funding of Erdogan.
Mm-hmm.
And if you talk to people in the old city of Jerusalem, he's very involved in funding groups in the old city of Jerusalem and in East Jerusalem because he has a plan to restore the caliphate of the Ottoman Empire. That's what he wants to do. So you look at some maps that he has that people that follow him put out, even ones that he stands in front of, and you see not the border of Turkey in Syria as we've seen it before. You see the Turkish border much further south into Syria.
Mm-hmm.
That's his goal. He also has this doctrine called the Blue Homeland, where he's going to take over large portions of the Eastern Mediterranean and Black Sea.
Mm-hmm.
So and whether he's too old to do this, and somebody else is going to rise in his place, that's the question. He's actually, I know a little bit about him. He is 2 days older than I am. Or I'm sorry, I'm 2 days older than he is.
Oh, okay.
So he's 70, and I'm not sure, by the way, I'm not sure how that happened. It seemed like I was 40 and then I was 70.
And all of a sudden you just jump 30 years real fast, right?
Yeah, I mean, you get these markers. You have things start to fall apart at 40, then some more stuff at 50, then some more stuff at 60. So far in this year 70, I'm doing. I shouldn't even say anything. It seems to be okay, but the year's not over yet. So, anyway, so he's been around for a while. But he's got his son coming up through the leadership ranks and that type of things. If this is the end times, he's definitely one of the players.
Mm-hmm.
If it's going to unfold pretty quickly here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe so. I believe so too, because I just see it just happening at a rapid pace right now.
Right. But listen, if we had done this 2 weeks ago, Vinny, we wouldn't have been talking about Syria changing leadership.
No, not at all.
I mean, this is, I heard a Jewish or an Israeli commentator. I don't know if he's Jewish. This guy is Jewish. He said, what's happened that we've seen over the last 5 days is the equivalent to the fall of the Berlin Wall. So
big statement.
Yeah, and I remember that. I remember Reagan going to Berlin and saying, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall," and it fell.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we've seen a bit of an earthquake. I mean, Russia didn't put up a fight. Iran didn't put up a fight. The Syrian army didn't put up a fight. And these guys moved across Syria in 3 days.
Oh, man.
And if you look at the map, there's a place called liveuamap.com. liveuamap.com. And they have these maps of control areas in Ukraine and Israel, Palestine, and Lebanon and Syria. Look at the Syria map. There's a little place where you can go and look at over the last days. Go back to November 28th, and then go to today. Most of Syria was red, meaning it was sort of under control of the Assad regime. He didn't really have really strong control of it. It's been a very divided country for a long time. But you could say that his army was in control. And today there are only two little tiny, red enclaves on the coast in the area of Latakia and Tartus, where Russia has a naval base. But my understanding is Russia's withdrawing its ships. They're trying to enter into agreements with the new government to get some of their materials out. Israel says, we can't let these guys get close to our border. So they've taken over the no man's land between Israel and the Golan Heights and Syria. They've taken over that land. They've taken over parts of Mount Hermon. And today, Israel controls parts of 3 border countries for the first time since the war, 6-Day War in 1967.
Wow.
This is a historically significant time. And Israel is bombing. I mean, I just happened to catch a little bit of Amir Sarfati, and he lives there, and he says it lives near an air base, you know, in the Jezreel Valley. And he says it's been a constant stream of jets taking off for the last couple of days, and they are bombing the smithereens out of what remains of the Syrian army weapons stores, bases, that they are completely obliterating them. Why? Because they don't want these jihadis to get a hold of that stuff.
No,
okay.
No, not at all.
So, I mean, why would Israel destroy all that stuff if they were trying to help these jihadis out? It just doesn't make any sense to me. And I've watched some of these channels, like one of the worst, I would call it this pro-Syrian, anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian, pro-Russian channels is Judge Napolitano. Mm-hmm. And he has these guys on like Douglas McGregor and some of these old CIA guys and this lunatic named Scott Ritter. And they've been saying for weeks, Israel is on the ropes. Israel is about to fall. Israel is in big trouble. Israel is near the end. And even today on Napolitano's channel, he had one guy saying, I think it might have been Scott Ritter, Israel is really under the gun now from Hezbollah and Iran. Really? What planet are you living on, dude? And so you see these people that have allowed their Jew hatred to completely taken any ability of themselves to reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, you know, I find to be very anti-Israel too nowadays is this organization called InfoWars.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What about, I don't really watch InfoWars, so I'm a free speech guy. I believe in free speech. And by the way, when there's free speech, that means you're going to get nuts saying things and doing things. There is a New Zealand, I think he's New Zealand, guy named Trevor Loudon. Trevor Loudon has written extensively and talked extensively about the red-green alliance, the red being the communists, the green being the Islamists, and how at least right now they're united. Eventually they'll fight each other, but for now they make a very practical bargain. Like Iran made a practical bargain, Shia Iran made a practical bargain with the Alawite Assad. If you listen to Dr. Mordecai Kandar, one of the probably the leading Israeli expert on Islam, he was on a friend's podcast yesterday, and he said the Alawites are considered by most of Islam to be idolaters.
Wow.
And so the question was, well, why did Iran hook up with the idolaters, Alawites? And the answer is because they would help them against their ultimate goal, which is getting rid of Israel and getting rid of the Jews. So they make these alliances when it benefits them. Eventually they fight each other. So Trevor Loudon did a great interview on the RAIR Foundation, RAIR Foundation. It's about a 37-minute interview that he did about 3 months ago. And he talked about how Russia, I know I always get in trouble when I say anything negative about Russia, but I don't trust Vladimir Putin. He's a thug. He has completely, everybody says, oh, well, he has great Christian values. Listen, folks, he would nuke you and vaporize you in a second.
And he wouldn't hesitate either.
And his pulse rate wouldn't even go up when he did it. So Trevor Loudon is a brilliant guy, and he did this talk. You should all go dig it out and listen to it. 37 minutes at the Rare Foundation. You can find it on Rumble. And he talked about how there's... Okay, I'll send you the link. So at the Rare Foundation, he talked about the fact that there's this religious, mystical thing behind a lot of stuff that Putin does. I interviewed a security expert at Israel. It's probably been about 2 months ago now, Miri Eisen. And she was one of the spokespersons. I think she was a spokesperson for Prime Minister Olmert when he was in office. Okay. And she said, I got to meet a lot of leaders around the world traveling with the prime minister. The only one that really scared me, physically scared me when I was in his presence, was Vladimir Putin.
I believe it. I believe it.
And so he's got there's a guy that gives a lot of philosophical, intellectual things to his views of the Russian Orthodox Church and Mother Russia, and Russia's the great protector of the Christian faith. And it's all total, complete Russian propaganda. What's happened, Trevor notes, is that this Russian propaganda operation to get people to be pro-Russian has been a propaganda operation, and it's infiltrated the right wing of American politics to a very bad degree. Mm-hmm. And my view, Trevor Loudon is 100% accurate in that. I see Pookie posted a link to Trevor. Pookie, I think there's another one about Putin and the far right and propaganda. I'll try to find it, but Pookie's on the right trail there in the chat.
Yeah.
And there's probably, by the way, Pookie, there's probably more than one video. This one was about 3 months ago. I'm just telling you is that I see a lot of this in different parts of the Christian right, the right wing in America, that they start spouting this Russian propaganda. And it's pretty troubling that it happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know that Russia is, the gateway to the anti-Israel uprising that's going to be happening towards the end of the age too.
That's certainly correct. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I don't get it why people are just buying into, oh, look, Russia's an Orthodox Christian nation. You better do some more research on that, guys.
Yeah. Here it is. Pookie, I'm going to share I don't know if I can post a comment in chat. I found it. Let me see if I can get into do I have an ability to post something in chat here?
Hold on. You should be able to.
Well, anyway, Joanna Wallace just posted the link. The Rare Foundation, Russia's Alexander Dugin's sinister plot to destroy the right wing in America, or whatever the title of that talk was 4 months ago.
Thanks, Joanna. You guys doing a great job.
Absolutely. Yeah, man. It's like having your own personal AI assistant here in chat. You say something here and they dig it out there. So
yes,
Alexander Dugin's sinister plot to destroy the right wing in America, and he's actually right. He's 100% correct. A brilliant guy. We should try to get him for an interview sometime, because he's so spot on what he might have a new book out about it too. But he did a thing on the Red Green Alliance a few years back. Mm-hmm. And this has infiltrated the right wing in America. And you see people falling for it. Like, the most glaring example would be Candace Owens. She's a complete tool of Russian propaganda and anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic thought.
Yes, big time. Yeah. I've said some things about her being anti-Semitic, and people was like, "Oh, you must be misconstruing what she's saying." I'm like, "No, I'm not. She's actually saying it out loud."
If you can listen to Candace Owens and not see it, you really need to sort of recalibrate your discernment meter.
Yeah.
Because she is anti-Jewish to an extreme.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's awful. And so, it kind of comes across as, well, we shouldn't get involved in foreign wars or anything like that. We have no interest over there. And sometimes that's true, and sometimes it's not. And so Syria is going to be a very defining issue. I think it's a very big deal to just let it go.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't do anything, then everybody will say, "See, you guys were behind it all along." The world is crazy right now. I mean, there's the ability to reason. So what we've seen in Syria is just a stunning thing, but mostly because I think Israel has been taking the fight to Iran and its proxies. They are decimating them. They're taking out their leadership. They're destroying their stores of ammunition and weapons and facilities and that type of thing. So you've got, actually saw a funny tweet yesterday. It said, since Sinwar invaded Israel, Hamas is gone, Hezbollah is gone, Syria has fallen, and Israel's winning everything. Mm-hmm. Sinwar must be the biggest, greatest Mossad agent of all time. And so don't put that out, because he's not. He was a Islamist creep, and he deserved to die. Mm-hmm. He was an evil, brutal guy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So anyway, and so we have all these. So this Russian propaganda thing is a very big deal. I mean, Russia is a country that has the economy the size of the state of Texas, but they project great power because they have phenomenal weapons.
Yep.
And the ability to use them, and things that we maybe not be able to defend against. So I'm very concerned about Russia, what Russia might do. They keep threatening to nuke us about every other day. And I think we need to take that threat seriously.
Yeah. I don't take anything that these thugs say lightly at all. Putin is he's a hardcore small man. He's a thug. And Zelensky is just a soft thug. That's what he is. He's a soft thug.
Yeah, I mean, I've got friends in Ukraine, and it was very distressing to me. I have pastor friends in Ukraine, and they watched the Tucker interview of Putin. Mm-hmm. And let me tell you that if a message on WhatsApp or whatever could set your phone on fire, these would have set my phone on fire. They were so upset that Tucker fell for the Putin version of history, which was completely inaccurate. Mm-hmm. And the Ukrainians don't like the Russians. The Russians have abused Ukrainians and used Ukrainians for years. The military doctrine of Iran has been, we will fight Israel to the last dead Lebanese. Never put our own people into the game.
Wow.
I have to go back and research it. So I spent a lot of time with some people in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And they said that, there were all these people that were supposedly killed in World War II from Russia. The majority of those people were from Ukraine. Mm-hmm. That died as Russian in the Russian army in World War II. Now, I'm not sure that that's totally accurate, but the Ukrainian people are adamant that this is true. Mm. So, and by the way, we talked about what brings Russia down. I don't know if we've talked about this or not.
No.
In Ezekiel 38, so let's assume, and I think you can make argument whether Russia's part of this or not, but let's just assume Russia's part of this eventually, with what's going to happen. It says, I will turn you, I will put hooks in your jaw, hooks, and turn you back. So let's just look at what's happened in the last 72 hours. Russia has left Syria. They didn't have that many people there, maybe 5,000 at the peak of their using Wagner people in Syria. So they didn't have a significant military force there. But they've left. If Russia's involved in this, are we at the stage where hooks will be put in their jaw and drag them back, turn them back to the area? When Putin went into Russia, now I'm going to reference Miri Eisen. In the interview that she did, I reviewed it in prep for my interview of her a couple months ago. She said, Putin scared me. And what you need to understand is that about 1 out of 6 or 1 out of 5 Israelis, their primary language is Russian, mainly in the north of Israel. So what did Putin say he was going into Ukraine for? In great part, he was going in to protect ethnic Russians. Now we have Israel that has a very large contingent percentage of its population that is ethnic Russian. And I've been up in north of Israel, and believe me, it's not hard to find a Russian-speaking person up. You're probably easier to find a Russian-speaking person up there than a Hebrew-speaking person.
Wow, that's saying a lot.
So is that going to be one of the hooks that draws Russia in? This belief that they have to protect ethnic Russians? I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. Don't quote me or anything that I have any idea what I'm talking about. So,
yeah. And plus, not only that, this is my personal thought. They're just going to go in there and try and plunder Israel, basically,
right,
of their resources.
Right. So I don't know. I mean, this is a very interesting time. I think I've said this. I think you may have heard me speak out in Temecula recently. Yeah, I kind of think that we're sort of at this time where if you got all these charts about Bible prophecy and stuff, maybe you ought to just keep them in an editable, a format that you can easily edit as the facts on the ground change. Because I think we're going to see some big changes. And by the way, I did a couple interviews last week before this whole thing started to melt down in Syria. And I'm thinking like, okay, I just hope now when I do a podcast with someone that it lasts for 24 to 48 hours before it becomes completely irrelevant with the changes that are going on in the world. So, I did an interview a week ago and now Syria's gone, or it's changed complete character. So I don't know. I just think that we have to be open to considering a lot of these things. And part of that, Vinny, that I was a lawyer. And when you're a lawyer, you end up reading, you put a case together. We have an adversarial system. So you look through all the facts and you try to find things that support your case. But as you're trying to find things to support your case, you got to read all the garbage that the other people are going to present in court too.
Oh, yeah.
So you sort of learn to evaluate things a little bit. So I think it's a little bit, we just have to be careful of planting our flag too early about some of these things. So anyway.
Oh man. Yeah. I'm pretty sure, John, the next time you and I have a conversation, things are going to be changing in that process quicker than we can say, ouch.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, so look, I really appreciate you taking the time to let me prattle on here and talk about these things, because I really think it's a significant time that we live in. I really do.
Absolutely. And they just put your the links to your platforms in the chat. Boy,
Yeah.
these moderators are just really working.
Well, this is funny because I started putting stuff up on YouTube in 2013.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I was teaching a class at a church, and then shortly after that, we left the church and helped start a Bible study. Then that turned into a church in 2013.
Mm-hmm.
And I just started putting stuff up. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
First year on YouTube, from February through December, 17,000 total views.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, wow,
Mm-hmm.
Now it's much different, but we didn't put it up to getting an audience. It was, I think the Lord has allowed the channel to grow and that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope not to abuse it. I really appreciate the time that people take, but we live in epic times, and we saw an epic thing this week. One commentator was in Israel. He said this way, I used this for my title yesterday. Tectonic, an earthquake, waiting for the volcano. What we've seen just happen in the Middle East just in the last week. That's a pretty good thing. I use the example in some of my talks. I've done a talk on Ezekiel 23 a number of times. It's one of my favorite discussions, and I always close with the Boxing Day tsunami in the Indian Ocean in Boxing Day, December 26, 2004.
Mm-hmm.
20 years ago. I cannot believe.
Wow.
That day, there was a massive earthquake near Sumatra, Indonesia.
Mm-hmm.
300,000 people died
Mm-hmm.
in the tsunamis. The tsunamis started by that earthquake.
I remember that day.
Yeah. Well, and look, in Northern California last week, there were tsunami warnings.
Mm-hmm.
And people that I know that live up in Oregon say there's earthquakes happening all the time off the coast of Oregon now.
Yeah.
And we remember it was like 44 years ago, Mount St. Helens blew up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, I think it was like a 3 on a scale of 5
Yikes.
for hurricane explosions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And one of those could change the world.
Yeah.
It is
Overnight.
one of those like Yellowstone or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody was talking to me. I said, "Oh, did you go to this part of Yellowstone? Because we were there 3 years ago." And they go, "Yeah, but they've had some volcanic activity, and that's not even worth going to anymore. It's completely destroyed what was there 3 years ago."
Mm.
And it's like, okay, so that's, I don't know. I just think it's going to be some tough times. Look, God's in control.
Mm-hmm.
He has us, when he's ready for us to be out of here, however that's going to happen,
Mm-hmm.
that's going to be, that's it, where our lives are in our hands. And none of us, you ought to live like it's your last moment.
Mm-hmm.
33 years ago, my father was getting ready to retire. He was a pastor. He was working on a sermon. The title of the sermon was "The Devil is Real." He sat down at his desk on a Wednesday morning, and his eyesight was going bad. So what he would do is he would type it out, and then he would, he was 68, so he thought, his memory wasn't as good. He's a brilliant guy. And he would run it through a copier, to increase the size of the type so he could read it in the pulpit.
Mm-hmm.
And I often wonder, what's this transition like for Christians?
Mm-hmm.
Because he's sitting at his desk, working on a sermon about the reality of the devil, and he had a heart attack and died sitting in his chair in his office.
Mm.
And so I'm thinking, so you're working on a sermon about the devil, and then you're seeing Jesus. My dad had a pretty good sense of humor, and I thought he probably chuckled like, yeah, that was pretty funny what you did there, Lord, but I'm glad I'm here. And so we need to know. I mean, when he got up that morning and went down to the office, he didn't know that this was his last couple of hours on earth.
Right.
And he served the Lord till the end. And so I think none of us know our exit date.
No, we don't. We don't know it at all.
And so we need to live like the next moment we're going to see Christ. And you ought to be living in a right way to get there. And so you think of this with the tsunamis back 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
There's the National Geographic Channel's been running a special about the aftermath of that tsunami. The stories are horrific.
Mm-hmm.
Lives completely upended in a morning. They got up and went to the beach. By the way, it was interesting. The water drained out of the bays in Thailand, 1,000 miles or more away from where the earthquake happened.
Yikes.
And the water drained out. The ships were grounded in the harbor. And people are walking out looking, oh, look at the coral reef. We used to have to get in a boat to come out here. And then all of a sudden, I think it's such a perfect picture of the end times. People started looking out to the horizon and they saw this white cap all the way across the horizon in the water.
Mm-hmm.
And people started saying, what is that? Look at the ocean. That's not, something's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And then somebody said, somebody said tsunami.
Mm.
And the reaction was, no, that's not a tsunami. And here it came. And all of a sudden, you see the locals running for the hills. And all the stupid tourists are standing there like, oh, look at the ocean. And that, I think, is a picture of the time that we live in, if this is indeed the end times, and I think it is.
Yep.
That there's a tsunami of God's judgment that's coming.
Mm-hmm.
And you better pay attention. And if necessary, head for the hills and prepare. So anyway, that's how I view the world. So
yeah. And it's a good way to view it, because I was talking to this gentleman a few months ago when I was up in Idaho. He goes, as believers, we have to remember we're not working towards the end. We're working towards the beginning of eternal life. I'm like, that's a good way to look at things.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's just weird because I think about what's this transition like that we're going to go through.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what it is. There's I talked to one fairly well-known pastor, and he said, I've been in the room when people die. And he said, when a believer dies, it is a holy moment that you will never forget.
Wow.
As people transition to eternity. So anyway, that's that's where I'm at.
Yeah, that's good. Anything special coming up this week that we should be aware of that you're going to be doing?
Well, there's a soft discussion going on with a younger guy, to me, that we might do a program together this week. That guy's name is Tom Hughes.
Yes, I know him very well. Yeah.
That may or may not happen. He's pretty busy. That guy really works hard, folks.
Yeah.
You need to understand that.
Mm-hmm.
And I did an interview with a guy named Mark Sutherland, the Sutherland Report. That might be up on YouTube or Rumble now. Just do a search for my name on Rumble or on YouTube, and then click in the upload date, like the filter, and click upload date. Will get you the most recent stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll filter out, every now and then there's some people that don't really, if you can imagine, they don't like me and they might put up a negative video or something like. I mean, it's been a while since that's happened, but so if you do some search on my name, you might find somebody who really didn't like me, and that's okay. They're wrong, you know.
Yeah,
and but so I did Mark Sutherland. I did a recent interview with Tony Koretz at Minute to Midnight, Olivier Melnick. We're also discussing the technology, transhumanism, AI, roundtable guys. It's possible. We're going to try to do one before Christmas, but that means pretty much next week. So I don't know how many people will be able to get together, but we were just exchanging some messages. And by the way, in that area, what's going on is unbelievable.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Henry Kissinger, the transhumanist technocrat who died, I don't know, 1 or 2 years ago, they just came out with a book. And the guy said, this is the Eric Schmidt, the former head of Google, was one of the co-authors. And he said Henry wanted this to be his last word. And the book is called Genesis. Now, that's interesting, the title they chose.
Oh, yeah.
And it's about technocracy and AI. And it essentially says, y'all need to get ready for the robots that are coming. And then a friend of mine lives in New Jersey, and she was writing on Facebook today about, they have all these drones flying around New Jersey. And there are reports that they're car-sized drones flying around Trump's club in Bedminster and military installations. And you're like, what is going on? You know?
Yeah.
So anyway.
Be prepared, folks.
Appreciate you, Vinny.
Yeah, same here, John. Do you mind doing us a huge favor and praying us out?
I will. Oh, I did a show with David Fiorazzo, too, on Worldview Matters.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if it's up yet or not. And I'm going to do a show on Stand Up for the Truth on Q90 FM in Green Bay on January 2nd. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to sit there on January 2nd and say, January 2nd, 2025, and say, I'm longing for the good old days of 2024. So anyway.
Which just a few days ago, right?
That's right, yeah. It seemed better in 2024. You know, and that's still 2.5 weeks before Trump's supposed to be sworn in. So it's going to be a very turbulent next 60 days. Just buckle up. So let's pray, and we'll get out of here. Lord, I just thank you for Vinny and the folks that took time to listen tonight. Pray that you'll bless them. Lord, I just pray that you'll give us all the wisdom and guidance of the Holy Spirit as we try to navigate the world in these days, that we'll act wisely, that we won't live in a spirit of fear, that we'll look at all of these things going on as opportunities to lead people, to share the gospel with them and lead them to the Lord, which the world desperately needs. So we pray that you will bless us and give us those opportunities. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you all very much for watching. And tomorrow is going to be an interesting surprise Tuesday. And we thank you all for supporting the podcast. We really appreciate it, because with your support, this is why we're able to, bring out good conversations like this. So thank you, everyone, for being here. We love you. Take care of one another, and I will see you tomorrow.